Hello everybody, I'm here with a very special friend, Safwan.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much. We did an interview quite some time ago now, maybe 6 months, 8 months.
No, I feel like it was maybe middle of summer, beginning of summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it just feels like a long time.
Yeah, a lot has happened, I'm sure.
So during my interview with Safwan, there was so many points that we touched on that I thought it just really sticks in my mind. So getting to this spotlight has been something I've been anticipating for a while. So again, thank you for
making the trek down here. I was looking forward to meeting you again, because we probably met decades ago, real briefly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's awesome. Thank you so much for the work you do too. Like I was saying, I'm super impressed, humbled by the sheer amount of work and the territory you've covered, and you know, the people you spoke to. It's really touching and meaningful. So,
well, in this project it's not a me thing; it's an us. So we're all doing this, and I'm so grateful. I feel like I'm part of it, not the one doing it. I'm just part of it because it's bigger than me, this project.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's definitely you doing it with us. So thank you. Thank you.
So let's start out with the beginning of your career. Before you started, tattooing professionally full time, you were in a punk rock band. Very, from what I understand, a pretty prolific band. You guys
for the era, for sure. Yeah, it was. I was in punk rock music for, I'd say maybe a bit less than a decade before I started tattooing. So I was in a band called Banlieue Rouge. It's a very French name, but we're one of those bands that was at the right place at the right time. So we have some sort of radiance or echo for the times. So it was really fun. And in that circle, there was a lot of people that were interested at the beginnings of tattooing. It was always around me, but I didn't respond to tattooing from the era. We're talking late 80s, early 90s. At the time, I kind of didn't think much of it. Most of the tattooers around didn't really draw, I think. We're working mostly from flash that they'd gather from all around. And every now and then I had friends tell me like, hey, Saf, my tattooer doesn't draw, doesn't have like exactly what I'm looking for. Would you draw something for me? But I didn't think much of it. I would just do it and then think later, man, he's gonna have that for life, like that's crazy. And then it would come back and it would look even more average than what I had drawn. So I was just like thinking it was a very unforgiving medium, tattooing. I kind of imagined, it must shake, it must bleed, people must be moving because they're hurting. Therefore, it's almost impossible to do something decent. Probably the machine's impressive. I had no idea. I had a bit of an awakening when I was in France for my first European tour, I think. We had roadies, Parisian roadies, and one of my roadies showed up with two full sleeves.
Okay.
Not accidental sleeves that were starting to get filled up because there's a bunch of things like sleeves. And they were nice, and I liked the drawing, and I was like, whoa, I can tell the same person drew all this, that he or she tattooed the whole thing. And my roadie was like, yeah. And in France, tattooing wasn't that far out yet. But my roadie happened to be close to Tintin from Paris, and he's like, well, on a couple of days off on the tour, I can introduce you. I'm sure he likes the way you draw, because I drew a lot for music, for stickers, posters, T-shirts, all the merch, stuff like that. But you draw, and it's win some, lose some. You draw a poster, it's not fantastic. You're stuck looking at it for a couple weeks until the show happens, and then you forget about it. It's like, that was my best one, but it's promo for a show, it's done.
Sure.
It was serving the purpose. But then that made me like really think of what I was drawing. I'm like, oh, can they tattoo this? Is that too tight? Is that too? I had no idea. But then when I saw his work, I was like, give me the name of the guy. And then I started looking, and I'm like, is there books? Is there magazines? Is there anything on this? And then I started digging. The minute I started digging and realizing, yeah, sure, most of the tattoos I'd seen are average or sub-average, but you can get nice tattoos. And then that made me think, oh shoot, means I started getting ideas, and I'm not a very reasonable guy. So immediately before having my first tattoo, I knew I wanted to be covered. And then as I started getting more educated, I was also studying anthropology at the time, because I had an easy time with schooling. And one day I was like, hey, pick a course for university. I was like, oh, I'm going to university, I'm there now. And so I chose anthropology because that seemed to be the most interesting subject I could do, just for personal culture, just my own education. And of course, the minute I started digging in cultural anthropology, and even like as far as paleontology, I was just like, tattooing was always there. Tattooing was always present. Tattooing's probably been around before writing. Homo sapiens sapiens is man who knows he knows in Latin. Well, that consciousness of your own person probably comes from body modification, most likely tattooing, or a form of pre-form of tattooing, accidental form of tattooing, maybe, I don't know. But to me, it all had meaning. All of a sudden, tattooing was the way, you know, it's kind of like the shining path that opened in front of me, and I knew that I wasn't just going to be a consumer or an appreciator of tattooing, that I had to play a role in that craft. So, yeah, it was revealed to me at some point. I was just like, that's it. I love this, you know? And I was unreasonable. I think most people around me thought like, yeah, no, he's not going to do that, you know? But I graduated from anthropology, and I remember the day I gave my university certificate to the only person that would give 2 bits about it was my mother. I gave her that. I also said there's a good news and bad news. So the good news is, here's the certificate, I graduated, bravo, it's done. But the bad news is I'm not going to do anything directly related because I'm going to be a tattooer.
And you know, that's funny, because that's one of the points that I wanted to bring up. In how much dedication you poured into getting a diploma, knowing that you didn't even want to do that. But
yeah, so I knew I was going to break my mother's heart. And I really love my mom. I'm both a mama's and a daddy's boy, but I come from a fairly conservative family, open-minded but conservative, and nobody on my mother's or my father's side has any tattoos, as far as we know.
Okay.
And not only was I going to get covered, but I also decided, well, I'm going to do this. It's my call in life. And it was weird because it was also coming at a point in my life where music was still important, but I was slowly seeing the repetition in it. I was slowly seeing the mechanics, and I was, I think, feeling the fact that I was about to get bored with it. And tattooing obviously was obvious. It was obvious then, and as it is obvious now, that you can never be done with it. There's so much to learn. There's so much to see. There's so much to try and master, or try to get a proper hold on, that I could never be bored with it. And 31 years later, I still think the same thing. And that is very exciting for me. I think I'm a person that needs to keep on learning and discovering. Otherwise, if I get bored, I get unmotivated. And if I lose focus, then yeah, I mean, in this case, it's very unforgiving. So
that's right. Yeah.
So that's, punk rock was great because it was a great entry point. Everybody around me was into it, and I was super lucky because my band, being fairly known in our circles, people knew my graphics, my design, my type of drawing. And even though that drawing was not adapted to tattooing and it was not great drawing, it was better than somebody who doesn't draw, you know. So that gave me a fair chance at, you know, as a tattoo wannabe at the time, it gave me a fair chance because most guys around weren't drawing that much. So you know how it is, if you draw and the people around you don't draw, they think you're great at it.
That's right.
Whether you are or not it remains to be seen, but for me that's what it was. I was better than somebody that wasn't doing it. So I was just like, all right. And now that I had seen what good tattooing could be, I was stunned. I was like, well, why aren't we all getting that type of tattooing? So very arrogantly, I thought like I needed to save my friends, and that if I got good, maybe I could give them good tattoos for a change, you know?
But inadvertently, you were building a clientele before you even knew you needed one.
Yeah.
So you were getting people's attention with your drawing and your music skills as well. But your drawing was turning heads before you even started tattooing.
Whether people liked it or not, they kind of knew it because I had that spotlight. I mean, we're talking pre-internet, right? So you're not flooded with as much, you know, art and access to music and general entertainment and media as we are now. So I kind of had like, a bit of a captive audience in that scene. And it really helped me out. I mean, we were really moving like a tight crew. So everybody that had one degree of separation with our bands or our crew, anybody in the gang was going to get tattooed by me. And I remember them, like, people were like, but that guy's just starting. He doesn't know what he's doing, which was 100% true. But our tattooers around us in the immediate vicinity were so, I want to say mediocre, but I'll say it. Like, they were not that good at the time, right? It was what it was. Whoever was tattooing was the choice you had, and that was it. And people were like, well, 50-50. Maybe he'll do a good job. Maybe it won't be good at all, but he's our boy, so we'll go to the guy, you know? And the same way, I felt a great, great sense of responsibility before I truly understood what tattooing meant. I think I understood that these friends of mine are really putting their faith or in their skin or whatever and trusting me with that task. And I have to really do it to the best of my ability.
You know, and what was surrounding you at the time was the old guard of tattooing, something that was going to change with your generation. With our generation, there was going to be a leap in drawing ability, but that old guard, you didn't see a lot of as much artistic ability. And maybe in small pockets, some could draw a bit.
I mean, there's a couple lessons from them that I should have taken early, but I only understood later in life. So you can learn so much, right? And at the time, we were kind of coming not in opposition in my case, but just as an alternative, right? And a bit of a counterculture within what tattooing was at the time. I needed to learn a lot about history, a lot about the immediate people that were around, who had done what. But it was funny because I remember, and we're talking like early 90s, let's say, to not make myself feel even older than I am. And I remember keeping excerpts from magazines that I had found, like Outlaw Biker Tattoo, you know, and then I was like, oh, there's a guy in Ottawa. He's pretty good. Dan Alliston, New Moon. So I remembered. I was like, oh, maybe I'll get a piece from this guy one day. And then I was just like, okay, that guy in Paris, I'm going to him. He's tattooing me, you know? And I remember when I got my first tattoo, it's a guy that doesn't tattoo anymore. Martin Lamarche, I went to see him and it was my birthday. I didn't tell anybody. I was just like, today I'm getting tattooed. And I said, you're going to do something really symbolic for me. It's simple. I picked it because I think you can do it. And the guy was like, poor dude must have been so insulted with the way I acted. I said, I want this black spider, but I'm going to get a bodysuit. He's like, what? And I said, oh, and I'm going to be a tattooer. And I didn't even have a tattoo on me. I told him that. The guy must have thought, like, what an arrogant pisser, you know? Yeah, and I remember that guy who tattooed me. He was a very nice guy. He did my first tattoo, and I ended up doing my first tattoo on him. I remember you said, I don't know, find a spot somewhere, do whatever you want.
You told him all that, and then he tattooed you, and then he let you tattoo him?
Not the same day.
Okay.
There was a couple weeks or months, I think, after that. He even gave me a job, actually.
Okay.
It was funny because he looked at my drawings and he said, yeah, there's tattooing material there. I'll show you how it works, and how about you come and work with us? So I thought, man, that's awesome. I got an apprenticeship. The guy maybe he's not a killer, but he can do a clean tattoo. Mm-hmm. I can't do a clean tattoo, so clearly I have something to learn from him. And he said, come with us. But then his version of learning was very super blue collar. He was like, well, you just got to fuck around with it and, you pick up tricks and then you get good. Which is not untrue, but I was like, I was already fairly educated. I knew how to learn and get a method, and I'm a guy that likes to make plans and restructure plans and try and go through the steps. So I asked him a lot of questions about, the machines, how it worked, some of the physical action. I kind of taught them a lot about cross-contamination because I like I said, I was an educated wannabe, but I had access to a lot of things. I'm like, I'm going to work with skin. I'm going to read about basic dermatology. I don't know much about that organ. So I needed to. So I came up and I knew a lot of things about tattooing that were all theoretical. Mm-hmm. Nothing was practice. And I needed those guys to kind of help me out. They were super sweet, but they were a bit unrealistic. I remember the other tattooer that was there that was far more ahead of me. Immediately within the first few weeks that I tattooed, was like, tattoo my neck. And I'm like, okay. We didn't even have the presence of mind to say, no, that's above my pay grade. I cannot do that yet. I can't do a clean line. I'm not touching your neck,
That's right.
And it was really a whole era of sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Some days you had I felt like, oh, I get it. I understand how it works. And then 2 days later, I'm like, I don't know how to do this, So it was not like today. It wasn't a straight lineup. It was a very complicated, volatile ascension. But I had the massive good fortune and privilege to have a lot of people that came to me. And that really helped me out. And like Tintin said one day to me, one day we were sitting, I can't remember where we were, and we were kind of having a weird, I had one too many drinks, heart to heart type thing. And Tintin is like, you must have been doing more good than bad at your beginning. And I'm like, why do you say that? Because I'm not sure about that. He's like, well, you started in Montreal. You're still in Montreal. You're okay. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, and he said to me, the city I started in, I had to leave, And that made me laugh. I'm like, really? For real? And that guy was so far ahead of me so early and such an inspiration when I started that for me, it was hard to think that. I was like, that guy never did a tattoo that was average. He's awesome. That in my mind, that's how I saw it,
That's right.
But it was a funny thing because I'd go further than that now. I'd say the neighborhood in which I started, I'm a couple corners away from where I started because I was always like, this is my niche, this is my hood, And I'm not a very calculating person as far as that goes. All my eggs are in the same basket. All my businesses are in this building. I live a couple of blocks from here. I shop around the people that have the businesses around. I know by their first name and vice versa. So I've been really invested, and I try to always stay, even when I didn't know what I was doing, I tried to keep the conversation open and told a lot of people man, I'll cover it up later in life. Give me a couple of years,
Sure.
And that was my perception of it, many of the first tattoos, I remember having cold sweats while doing them, oh my God, where is this going? How am I going to get out of this one? It was the era. It was hard I didn't have a formal apprenticeship. The guys I worked with, Martin and Bono, I thought they were going to teach me everything, but really their way of teaching was like, hey, let's do it, you know?
Just go for it.
So yeah, and Martin Lamarche, the guy who kind of helped me out at the beginning, was more of a piercer than a tattooer. And he said, well, I'm going to stop tattooing. There's no point. Never going to draw. I'm decent at piercing. I'll stick to that. And I was just like, okay. But then I realized that not very long after that, that I needed to travel and go see the people that I thought were inspiring. So, you know, I had just heard about the Leur family. I had just heard about Tintin. I was starting to, you know, point a few people in Canada and the States. And then I was just like, okay, I got to go there, you know. And I didn't go see everybody, but I mostly did what I felt like I needed to do at the time to learn. And I realized being away from your hometown, not only is it easy to absorb new information because you're in that mode of traveling, that really helped me out. I think it helps my neuroplasticity and just learning stuff. But beside that, I also realized, you know, like you were saying, from the old guard to us, I was not a threat when I showed up, let's say in Paris, and I was saying, no, I'm in Montreal and I'm going to keep doing my work in Montreal.
Yep.
I'm just here passing through, you know?
That's right.
Then people were like really candid. Not Tintin was, I mean, he would have never been threatened by me in any way, shape or form, but he was just like very nice to me. I think it's because he liked my band and we had friends in common and we hit it up. A lot of people told me, oh, that guy's not easy to approach. And he was always very nice to me. Like tough love type stuff. Come sit there. You can look. Don't talk. I don't want to hear you.
Sure.
Which is an effort on my side because I'm a loudmouth. But it was really helpful to be. But at the beginning, you know how it is. It raises more questions than it answers. Because I was like, I saw you doing that. Like, why do you do like... I had to learn. I had to get tattooed. I had to travel more. I had to do more. But then a lot of stuff that you see along the way makes more sense later in life when you... I know why he does that. Yeah. You know?
And taking that minute to really take it in and to watch and excuse your mind in the process. When you can excuse your mind and really observe what's in front of you, you probably are learning a lot more than people realize. And I think that was sort of the value and the benefit of maybe the older style of apprenticing before, is that
for sure
the student would sit in front of the tattoo artist for long periods watching, but there was more going on than just watching if the student was really astute in their ability to just watch.
Of course. I think there's a lot of that. I kind of wanted to find somebody to just apprentice me and all that, but at the same time, I wasn't truly ready to leave my life where I was in Montreal at the time. I knew there was nobody in Montreal that could truly help me out. I had a couple friends that were starting to tattoo at different moments and eras, and we kind of became friends later in life, you know? So, yeah.
And I remember one of the things that stood out to me during our initial interview is that you would go play shows in Europe, and then you would take the train and you would sleep on Tintin's porch.
Yeah. Basically what happened is on my second tour, the cat was out of the box. I had time to start tattooing, came back, and my roadie, who was still the same roadie and friends with Tintin and all that, he kind of spilled the beans. Because I was going there, I met him first approach, he was really nice to me, and then I knew I was going to get tattooed by him. And then he said, at some point, the whole band came in the shop, in Tintin's shop, because they knew I wanted to go there, so they're like, oh, we'll come see it. And then my roadie was like, hey, GF, my drummer, had a piece that I had done on his leg. He was wearing shorts, and Arno, the roadie, Arno Fletcher, said to GF, he's like, hey GF, come here. He's like, hey Tintin, look, this is one of the tattoos Safwan did.
Okay.
And then I was just, oh shit. You know, I didn't tell him I tattooed, you know, because I didn't want to. I was like, I felt I wasn't good enough to tell him, and Yeah, I did, you know.
And how did he receive that?
Oh, he was really funny. He went and looked at it and looked at my drummer, and he was like pretty diplomatic. He said, "That's nice. When did you do that?" Huh, that's really good. And he said something like, it'll be a good tattoo when you finish it. Because I was like, what do you mean? I finished it. This is it.
You thought it was done.
Yeah, and he was like, yeah, but you didn't finish. Because it was a phase in my life where I was like leaving a lot of skin in my tattooing, you know, coming from more of a traditional American like point of view, you know.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, why didn't you bring the color to the line? When didn't you close this? Why didn't you do, you know? And I was just like, yeah. Later he was hurting, you know, I'll finish it. But it stuck with me because many times still to this day, like over 30 years later, sometimes I finish a piece and I'm like, hold on, is it really finished? And I'm kind of looking at it. Is there like little things I could tighten? So Tintin, when he realized that I was tattooing and that I was really interested in the whole thing, he kind of figured it before my friend outed me, because I remember I was such a nerd. I kept going around his shop, and like I was telling you, I was starting to read about tattooing and the new players, you know, that made it exciting at the time. And I remember seeing photos of Tintin. I'm like, oh, Tintin, that's you in New York. That's you with Andrea Alston, and oh, that's you, Andrea Alston, and Sean Vasquez here, and this, you know. And at some point, Tintin was like, "You tattoo?" And I was like, "Well, you know, I'm really into that." But he knew right away, because I think my level of interest was too much for just, you know, a consumer or an onlooker, you know.
That's right.
So I think he had figured it out. And probably my friend had told him before, like I'd have to look into that, who knows. But it became a detail, and he was very nice to me. And I was asking him so much questions, and he said to me, and poor guy, I don't know if he fully realized, I think he did, because he's a guy who, but he said to me, he said, you can come here anytime. Well, I will, you know, and because I was on tour, and that tour was really long. The second tour was like over a period of almost like 70 days or some, and not everything was filled. So the minute I would see an opening, the train system in Europe, in France particularly, was very good. So I tell my band, where do I need to be? What's the next sound check? What city? What time? And I'll tell my road manager, I'll be there, see you later. And skip, you know, and catch the first train back to Paris. And I learned how to get onto the train without paying. Because in Europe, the way they do it is they'll come as the train is already gone, and they'll check your tickets. And if you don't have tickets, normally they give you some sort of a contravention, some sort of a ticket that you'd have to pay. But every time I pulled out the Canadian passport, you'd be like, oh my God, that's so much paperwork, you know? And to be like, okay, all right, kid, you're out on the next stop. But then when I figured that out, I'd only take expresses, because then my destination was Paris. So they're like, you're out next. Oh, okay, sorry, sir. But then I was like, yeah, that's where I'm going, dipshit. You know, like, so I kind of played it that way.
Yeah.
And it's efficient, it's fast. You can sleep in the train while you're going. So sometimes, you know, my schedule was so weird. I'd show up and I'm like, oh, you know, the shop's not opening right away. And yeah, I think once or twice, you know, on the shop in Saint Sebastien, maybe a couple times more than that. Like Tintin found me there, you know, and he's like, get up, let's go have a coffee, you know.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
And
tough love, though.
You know, like one of the things that stood out when we initially spoke to is how curious you are. And me being a very curious person, and I'd have to be to do this kind of project. But I see curiosity as such a powerful tool to learn, and it's a catalyst for growth. You have to edit yourself to be curious, to ask a question. Do you think that impressed Tintin initially, you being very curious? And
I don't know. I can't answer for him, but one of the things that's for sure I understood about my life is that I've been very, very fortunate very privileged to be at the right place at the right time. Because if somebody like me showed up 10 years after that, when everybody was looking for apprenticeships or interested in tattooing, yada yada, he would have been like, get the hell out of here, kid, and see like 10 of you every day, like,
That's
sick
right.
of you, you know? I think at the time I probably stood out a tiny bit because it was less common or less obvious. And I think our background helps too. You know, I come from, you know, street scene and he did too somehow. And we had friends in common. So I can't say it was on pure value on my side. It was probably like an overall package that made me palatable a little bit. He's like, all right, you can sit there and not.
And he liked your music.
He liked my music. He came to some of the shows when we weren't super big yet. So he was like, I mean, we became bigger in, you know, on second, third, fourth tour in Europe. But yeah, he was into it. He knew the music. He knew some of the songs. So it was good. Like we had kind of a background that was a bit similar as far as the music came, and that scene at the time meant something to us. So that really definitely opened the door for me. But I do think that, you know, me being a real fan of his, not only his tattooing, but his drawing kind of helped also, you know, because I appreciated his graphic, the way it looked like a strong drawing as a tattoo. You know, it was like, yeah, it wasn't new school, it wasn't traditional, it was like just something else, you know, and to me it was like fantastic.
Yeah. Well, another point that I wanted to touch on was you were looking to change ink suppliers. And tell us a story about that, because that was awesome.
Yeah, that was funny. It was, you know, I was tattooing, and the pigment I had at the first shop I was in wasn't even my choosing. It was the pigment that was kicking around the shop. And I had so little access to equipment at the time that I was asking, hey, what's in this? You know, what's it made of? And they were just like, it's ink. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not like a dye. What is it, you know? Is it polymer that's in suspension? Like, is it the actual pigment? You know? And they were like, I don't know. We buy it like that, you know? And unfortunately, those guys were like doing it. They knew a whole lot more than me. But all the questions I was bringing, they couldn't answer, right? It was, why are you asking? Just use it. Shut up and use it, you know? And that wasn't a good enough answer for me. I'm like, well, hold on. What am I putting in the skin? Like, it has to be a particle of color, because otherwise the epidermis wouldn't be able to catch it and fix it and put it there, you know? Like, so I started asking those questions there, and they were like, what? You know, they as much as they thought there was value in me being curious and educated, I'm sure like, I was just equally as annoying to them, you know?
It probably translated to you being a pain in the ass.
100%. So then I was hearing, you know, in the circles, we heard there's this ink that's really cool that's called dynamic, you know, it's really good. And I looked it up, you know, and I was like, dynamic, eh? And I was like, man, they look like they have a nice color palette, 12 colors. Wow, I want them, you know? And I think it's straight out of a magazine ad. I called up, you know? And I'm like, hi, I wanted information on your colors. And the guy who answered me, I think his name was John. I think he was the original owner of Dynamic down in Florida, in Tampa at the time. And he was linked to a tattoo shop, I think that was called Artistic Armor, if I remember correctly. Anyways, those guys were already light years ahead, you know, and I was just like, wow. So I called him and I started asking all these questions over the phone. And obviously the guy was busy. And he said, hey, listen, man, you know, like all these things are easier to explain, you know, in person. We have the stuff, it's easier to show you. Why don't you come down here and we talk about it? So I thought about it and I was like, okay, when's a good time? I said, I don't know, early in the week, you know. And I think I was talking to him on a Friday and I showed up there on a Monday. And it was not all on merit because my dad was working in Florida for a while, for a couple of those years. But he was in a completely different area of Florida. He was on the other side of Florida. But I just thought, hey, Montreal, you know, like Orlando's not expensive. I'll get a ticket. I'll stay in my dad's. I'll borrow his pickup. I'll go over there. Ta-da. So I show up there, and the guy was like he was already whitehead, if I remember correctly. He was way older than me. And he looked at me. He's like, "What's your name?" Safwan. That's Safwan. Okay. Super nice. And then he said, "You got a weird accent. Where are you from? Like Jacksonville?" And I'm like, no, higher up, actually.
Yeah.
That side, but higher up. I'm from Montreal. And he was like, "What? Where?" And I'm like, "Montreal, Canada." And then it hit him. He's like, "Hold on. Did you call me from Montreal and you came down?" So I said, "Yeah." So the guy, I think, was a bit either touched or he had pity. He was like, "That guy's like nuts." Or, I had no idea. But at the time, he was like super gracious. He was really nice to me. He showed me a little bit and answered most of the questions. I didn't have the right questions at the time, but it was the beginning of it, you know. I just wanted to learn more and feel confident that whatever I might get from him, putting it in the skin of my bros at home was like a good idea, you know. So I realized, oh, how much is it? And I was like, oh, I can't take just 2 colors. I came all this way. So he saw that I didn't have much money. Most of my change had been on the travel. And he said, "Well, what do? You tattoo? What kind of stuff?" And I was like, well, at the time I didn't have portfolio, but I had like sketchbooks. So I started showing him my drawings. And he said, probably out of being very generous, he said, "Well, if you had flash sheets of these drawings, they're good, I'd buy them." I said, "Oh, like, what do you mean?" He's like, "Well, flash sheets like these." And I was like, "Oh, so how many flash sheets would I need to have your ink palette?" And he said, "I don't know, maybe 8, 9, 10, depending how big and how full they are." I said, "Oh, that's cool." I said, "No problem."
Yeah.
So I went back to my dad's and I said, "Let's find an art store. Let me draw for a couple days, you know." And my dad was like, "Yeah, because I got work, so you stay here, you do your shit."
Yeah.
He had a tiny place, you know, and I started drawing them, and they're terrible. They're terrible, like the worst flash ever. But I guess for the era, it was colorful stuff. And I went back a couple days later, and I said, "I got them." He's like, "Oh, really? Let's see them." And he looked, and he's like, "Okay, well, that's pretty good." And he was really nice guy. Like I said, I've been blessed. I met a lot of nice people that helped me out. And I don't know if they know how much they helped me out. Like both Tintin and I believe John from Dynamic at the time. Because I know that company's been sold twice since then. So I think that was the original owner. And they empowered me. You know, it's not that, I mean, I tattooed with those pigments for just a little bit of time, maybe less than a year. But he gave me a tattoo machine. He was like, "If you give me all those, I'll give you this." And he put in a tattoo machine. And I thought at the time it was the greatest machines of all. It was an aluminum machine, anodized. I think it was like either bright orange or bright red with a little design anodized. I was just like, wow, that's it. I can tattoo the world now, you know, because I had one machine in Montreal and it was terrible. I kept that frame just as a souvenir to stay humble. And yeah, he gave me that, and he was really funny. He said, "Hey, hold on, are these the originals?"
Yeah.
And I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, No. Take those, go make laser copies, bring me the laser copies, keep those and sell them to somebody else." And I was just like, I didn't see the point, you know, at the time. I was just like, really? Okay. And I must have done it a couple of times because I was like broke. But it's funny because Dave in Toronto, Psycho Dave, one time he's like, "Hey, you know those flash you did?" And he's like, and I was like, "Please burn them." He's like, "No way, I'm keeping those." And I'm like, yeah, that guy could blackmail me. It's so ugly. But it was the era, you know. It's like, what could somebody want as a tattoo on a flash sheet? And that's where we were at the time. But he was really, in Florida, Dynamic, they were really, that guy was like so nice to me. And I think he just thought like, all right, like this guy's nuts. Let's give him a couple of things, send him on his way. Who knows? He's taking him back to Canada. Yeah. Yeah, they were really cool. But for me, it was nice to see I was in Florida. It was another universe. I was hanging out with like my dad's neighbors were like, oh, you're a tattooer. Can you tattoo a rose on me? And I'm like, actually, now I can. I have a new machine and pigment, you know? So I did a couple of tattoos while I was there. I don't remember the level I was at. It was probably not brilliant. But I realized, man, I can go anywhere with this. As long as I carry tattooing with me, I'm never going to be jobless. Like, I can do this, you know? And at the time, I couldn't do it very well. But already it was clear to me that it had a lot of power. It gave me a lot of freedom, a lot of movement possibilities. And I think that kick-started me on traveling, because that obligation to go to Florida showed me you can just go. You can just do it. You want that guy in Paris to tattoo you? You can just go. And it was funny because I was already traveling with music. I was well traveled because my family traveled a lot at the time. Or anyways, we're not. My parents' family is not from Canada originally, so we kind of went back and forth a couple times. And I had been to Europe before, and it was not. Changing countries or continent was not a limitation for me at the time. I realized like I could do it. I did it with music. I can do it with this. Let's do it. But it's happened so many times. Like, it's stuff that I would never do again, you know. I'm definitely too old and too comfortable now to do things like that. But I remember showing up to France for guest spots with not a penny in hand. Like nothing, like €0 or 0 francs at the time. And I showed up in shops, and the guys in the shops like, oh, we took deposits for you. There's a couple appointments for you. Here's an envelope. And I was like, thank you, tattooing. I will eat tonight, you know? And it was just like amazing, because the stupidity I had is I never doubted that I could do it. And that was like how convinced and probably delusional I was at the time, because I really wouldn't take no for an answer. And I thought like, yeah, this is going to be awesome. Let's do it.
I don't know that I'd call it stupidity. I'd call it a superpower, because how often in life do we approach something knowing what to do? We think we know, but we travel down the road just a short ways, and we look back and we say, oh shit, I didn't know nothing.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything.
I didn't know so much that I didn't know how much I didn't know. It was like that. Yeah. And that made me oblivious to the problems or the complications that I could have along the way. But, you know, I think tattooing is a profoundly human experience. And if you can carry and transmit a little bit of that enthusiasm for what you do, I think there's people that are bound to appreciate that. It's very contagious in a good way. You know, if you can be like, hey, this is going to be great. Thank you for letting me do this. I'll do my best. I'll give it my best shot. I think a lot of time people will take that over super proficiency from someone that doesn't give a shit. You know, they will. I've seen a lot of time people love more tattoos that are kind of average, but they had a great experience with, than an end result that's awesome from a person that they had a bad experience with. I mean, ideally you want both. That's what you have to strive for. But that gave me a chance, especially at a time where I think tattooers, a lot of them were less approachable, or they had such a closed hunting ground that they didn't need to be nice. You know, they didn't need to be cool. They didn't need to be interested. It's like, hey kid, you want that tattoo or not? Otherwise, next, you know? That's right. And it was kind of cool too, because man, so many times you'd want to do that. Be like, don't waste my time if you're not serious. But yeah, it's a strange turn, you know?
And you just said tattooing is a human experience. The further I go into interviewing people, and I've captured around 300 or more profiles.
Incredible.
And, you know, I'm up to my neck in profiles, but I feel like I've only got to my ankles in understanding. Like, the more people I talk to about tattooing, the bigger it seems to get. It unpacks. It keeps unpacking in unique ways. So tattooing is a human experience.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful one. What does it mean to you to do tattoos, to get tattoos?
Yeah.
Like what does tattooing mean to you?
I think that's a very, very deep question, and I don't want to go too new age on it, but I think tattooing holds way more power than we think, even us as tattooers. And I'm not trying to give us self-importance or anything like that, but I think the gesture, if you look back, it had a lot of power. It was like associated to a lot of rituals of passage. It was a lot of growth steps. And I do think that if you treat tattooing like, I have a thing that says what we do here is sacred, and I kind of want to set myself apart from the tattooing that's only, casual, only like banalized, only like, yeah, whatever, it's just like something you can or cannot do. I feel like the real strength of tattooing comes when you actually give it a real truthful chance. Like if you really take it seriously, if you approach it with the possibilities it has, and if you really consider the whole universe of possibilities tattooing has to offer, and then you go in, you're forced to do a little bit of an introspection, and you're forced to ask the tattooer to come in on that ride with you in order to be able to get it done. And on the other side, if the tattooer takes it with the same interest level and with the same passion, then it becomes something pretty magical. Like I've built pretty much my life in the past like 3 decades around tattooing, and everything I have around me is at one degree of separation of tattooing. Like I don't need to go very far. Like I remember, I don't know who said that, but I think someone at some point in my life had said, stick to tattooing, give it energy, give it power, and it'll give back to you. Tattooing will give you everything you need. Because it is human, because it's a truthful exchange that's sometimes symbolic, but either way it will be profound. If you care, if you do it right, if the person that comes to you cares and wants somebody that cares, then it's instantaneously, there's an action that becomes a little bit synergic there. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but force, it's obvious to me. It's like a big evidence. And I'm lucky because most of my clients now are friends, The majority are people I truly appreciate and that give me so much, just even in like having the chance to know them, having the chance to impact their lives, to exist in their whole adventure, So what it means to me is that I think we're doing, unknowingly, through doing a service that's like very commodified these days, I think we're doing something that's it's more far-reaching than people know. And I do think that as much as I knew about, tattooing's past and its, history in different cultures, I think I still didn't get it, how we are in search, as modern humans, we are in search of that truthful, authentic, long-term carrying experience. And tattooing is a promise you make to yourself. Things change, things keep moving. What's true, what's authentic, what's powerful. Tattooing is one of these things if you give it that chance. So to me, it means a lot. It means a lot to be able to do that. It's super fulfilling, super gratifying. It's super... It honors me to be able to do that. But there's also another thing, is I think we're all actors in the story of tattooing. And I really internalized this recently because, tattooing is a very saturated field right now. There's like a lot of tattooers that are struggling. We're all working harder to get a bit less out of it maybe right now. And I think I noticed it, how defeatist and how low some tattooers from my generation are, and I feel like it's pissing me off to a degree, because I'm like, you grew in that wave, that upgoing wave that was going to lead us to the golden age of, like, the last golden age of tattooing, and now that wave's passed, and you're crying, and you're pissed, and you're bothered, and you want to give up, which I understand, because we all had that feeling at some point. But I had a friend of mine recently, and I love the guy, but man, is he he's soft-spined sometimes, and I hated that. He told me, like, well, I don't tattoo anymore, which was shocking to me, because I think he's talented. He's tattooed me. And I said, you don't tattoo anymore? He's like, yeah, it's not much work now, which is, I understand, right? You can't be a tattooer if nobody comes to you. You're just a tattooer in your head. So I said, oh yeah, well, harder times, right? He's like, well, tattooing's become shit, man. So, right, Saf? Tattooing sucks, right? And that offended me. I said, well, buddy, tattooing is what you make of it. Mm-hmm. And that's the only absolute truth I will stand on and spew at people. Tattooing is what you make of it. So if you says it sucks, your version of tattooing sucks. But I'm sorry, the tattooing we do, we still feel it's sacred. We still feel it's a privilege. I still feel it's generous. It's profound. It's amazing. And it's still magic. So step back, bud. It's not for you anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was like harsh. And I think what shocked me is, I think it was the first time I heard it, because he had spewed his version of defeatism and shitting on the tattooing trade, because he was disappointed. He was hurt. He was, like, wounded. He didn't know where to go. So he had to convince himself, better give up, But I was like, you have your role to play. So if you're saying that, I just wanted him to, even though I love him dearly, I just wanted him to shut the fuck up about it. Like, you're not going to do it? All right, bud. Move away. Mm-hmm. Let me do this. Like, let us do this. Because I think it's very negative. If you say it's nothing, if you say it's not important, then, what prevents people to just come in, well, I want to do it. Why can't I? It's my right to do it. Mm-hmm. No, tattooing is nobody's right. Tattooing is a privilege, and it remains a privilege that's granted by the people that entrust you with their projects. Mm-hmm. It's not a right. It's like, it's not a right to be a shaman. No, the rest of the tribe allows you to do that. They trust you for that. You got to elevate yourself and try and get to the proper level for the trust that's handed your way, So, sorry, a lot of my expressions are French, but that's, I think, to me, what it means is it's definitely linked to a moment in time. That moment is very important. Why you're doing it, how you're doing it, what you're giving to the person can be very empowering for us, very gratifying for us. So the least we can do is, like, try and be as good as we can and as truthful as we can, I think.
And I think you hit the nail on the head with tattooing is sacred. It's very sacred to me. I think it was Bill Reed. He was a famous hide-up artist.
Yeah.
He put on the $20 bill, when they featured his artwork on the $20 bill, there was a quote, and it said, "Without the arts, how would we ever know each other?" And I think that's makes up a portion of the power that we experience in tattooing, because it's a human thing, but it's a human thing you do with another human. You're touching that person. There's a connection.
Of course.
And the person you're tattooing is sharing. They're being vulnerable. They open up. And you may, if you're a good tattooer, a good human, you will listen to them.
Yeah.
And you'll understand them. And they may listen to you, and they'll understand you, and that in turn builds a connection. When we listen to each other, we connect more deeply, and we understand each other.
Yeah.
And there's a natural feeling of of a bond that forms.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And that makes up a little portion of what's sacred in tattooing, is the bond that we create, how we celebrate people's lives or help them move beyond something that's not worth celebrating.
Yeah. That's why it was particularly shocking for me, you know, like when you realize like there was a whole moment in time where, you know, there's a whole lot of people in tattooing that will not own up to their actions, that will not care about what they're doing. They're just like the only appreciation or, you know, like success or failure is like quantifiable by money or just by like, you know, material access. And then, you know, it goes far. There's like you said, people expose themselves, they feel vulnerable. There's a whole process. We know the process of, you know, where you and I are both tattooed, in my case before I was a tattooer. And you know, like to hear that people are abusing that position or giving attitude, or, you know, like I was just like kind of disgusted a little bit by the situation and to hear about these things. But then I also like comforted myself by saying like, well, this is not the brand of tattooing we're doing. Like, I feel like you have to carry yourself as a bit more noble than if you weren't doing that activity. That craft like forces you to, like you said, enter a little bit the person's life, and yeah, they'll carry that experience through time. So it's just like I felt like it was important to distinguish what I do and how I do it in those times. And it comes again, you know, like for a while there, people are like, yeah, he's just snobby, he's just arrogant about it. Yeah, okay, maybe a bit, you know, but it's just then the time that we're living now, people are like, yeah, this is a tattooer every corner. I mean, yeah, a run-of-the-mill tattooer every corner, maybe. How about like a real solid person that's going to take care to the best of their ability and actually did the groundwork in order to do this right? You know, or that's not run-of-the-mill. That's not like every corner. That's not every 20 meters. That's so right. I'm like, I'm not, I can comfort myself by saying, yeah, we're doing something different. We're doing the stuff I love, you know, the stuff we think is great, the stuff that made us love tattooing. And that's important to not lose sight, because yeah, it is banalized. It is common point now. It is, but I think it's, tattooers are, a lot of time we think about tattooing as its own thing. Tattooing's part of a bigger fabric, right? The human fabric, obviously, but I think it is normal in a craft that became an industry that the demand and the offer get to level. And for a long time, tattooing seemed fairly easy because the demand was way higher than the offer. And it spawned a lot of like attitudes that I thought were terrible, were like really pathetic. Like all those tattooers that were like, hey, you know, I don't know if I want to tattoo you. How about you write me a poem by email? And if I like the poem and your quality, then maybe I'll respond. Otherwise, sorry, you know. Or you have between 7:39 and 7:48 on that day to book. And if you don't book within that timeline, exactly with then sorry, you know. It's just, I thought it was just like, okay, so you're making yourself less accessible. I understand, because there's too much demand and you need to cut off a little bit. But how about like treating people nicely? How about like not making jumps through useless hoops? You know, like when we live in a world of formalities and, you know, like, yeah, just too much administrative bullshit and too much like complications and fill up the form. And, you know, I just thought like, this is not what tattooing is about. And I mean, once again, we all have different versions of it. But I just thought, like, I'm not going to cry if these people have to disappear now or eat up their bad attitude, you know, now that they've been super shitty to the people because they had so much demand. Like, realize, buddy, you're not getting so much demand because you're awesome. You're getting so much demand because there's a lot of demand, you know, so you're clearly getting some. But I think now what makes me sad is I realize a lot of people that are kind of giving up or walking away or really feeling the blunt of the situation are not always the worst ones. Oh, lights back. But I see people giving up. It depends where you are in your life, how much like stamina you still have, how much you feel like you can still keep the foot on the gas,
Yeah. I see tattooing, like the commercialization of tattooing, I see it like a tide. A tide comes in, with it brings all kinds of things, but then the tide goes out. And those of us who have built a good foundation will still be standing when the tide goes out and it pulls back what's not rooted. And when I say rooted, I mean tattooers that have built connections and community with their clients. And that's what seems to hold people these days, is you have to have a
that makes more difference, But I'm not surprised, like, older tattooers, I remember friends of mine, we were, in our 20s, we finished tattooing, we'd go eat at a restaurant and go out. And within that time that we're social, out and about, we're bringing a lot of people back into tattoo shop. Because, who are these guys? Oh, they're a bunch of tattooers. They're friendly. You can talk to them. Hey, I'd like to show you this. And we were kind of almost doing consultations wherever we went, And now being older, less social activities, less time for that, more, if you're just in your shop or just in on your page online and nowhere else, you're going to be flooded. You're going to be flooded because everybody else is there too. So what makes you different? Oh, well, I met Ned. He's a real nice guy. We chatted. He has a great point. I'm going to go sit down with him to get a piece. That's what makes a difference. Like you carry tattooing in your heart. Well, you're bound to transfer that love to somebody else that's going to be like, wow, I love it too. I'm going to go,
Yeah.
And in that sense, it's positively like very contagious.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to not be outside of a community, or the guys that are completely recluse, the guys or girls that are completely recluse. And it's tempting sometimes, because you see some days you see a bit of the stupidity around and you just want to shut the door and just go back to your artwork and all that. But like I said, if you have no link, you're not a point of reference for people for tattooing, then why you? Why not the other guy? Why not the guy that's like out and about everywhere and talks about it and carries it? So it is, I see it too like a tide. I think we rode, like that wave and comes back down and goes back up. Luckily, I didn't start when it was popular. I started when it was like slowly becoming accepted, right? And I remember the first sleeves that I saw around me, aside from my friend back then in Montreal, were either done by me or by close friends of mine. There's nobody else, So when we'd see them, we'd see bigger pieces, we'd be like, hey, wow, who did that? And then instantaneously, it'd strike a conversation, create links. Oh yeah, I heard about this guy. He's good. Like, I'm going to go see him. Let me get in touch, And it's just like, it was new, it was rare. And it was like slowly growing. Even our version of what was a big piece back then,
Yeah.
It's funny, I remember like if a guy came up and wanted a chest piece this big, we were like, whoa, that guy's deep in, he's like.
And the back piece now is to your knees.
Yeah.
That's a back piece.
Yeah, a back piece back then is like I did something on the back this big, But it's fantastic, I feel super lucky that I learned in the era I learned it. That I got into tattooing in that era when it was not quite an industry yet. It wasn't. There was a couple companies involved with tattooing, but it wasn't the industry we know now.